اهلا بحضراتكم. اهلا وسهلا دكتور جمال. اهلا وسهلا دكتور محمد حسنين. بروفيسور جمال بالقدير, chairman of the MENA Region International Diabetes Federation, and Professor Mohamed Hassanein, president of the DAR International Alliance. موجودين معانا virtually من المغرب ومن الإمارات. We're going to start the opening with talk of Professor Jamal Belkadir, the chairman of the International Diabetes Federation MENA region. Professor Jamal, please go ahead. تفضل حضرتك. Professor Jamal.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ines Shaltout. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to express my great thanks to Professor Ines Shaltout, the president of the Arabic Association for the Study of Diabetes and Metabolism, and the organizers of the 18 Fasting and Diabetes Conference for their invitation to participate today to this international meeting. I would have liked to be with you today, but my mother's illness and its rapid deterioration with her death last week have completely changed my program, which you will easily understand. As you know, fasting is not recommended for everyone. People who are ill or live with medical condition, including some people with diabetes, can be exempted. However, majority of people living with diabetes choose to fast, and sometimes choose to do so in contrary to medical advice. As a large number of people with diabetes fast during Ramadan, there is an urgent need for coherent, evidence-based practical guidance to help them and the health professionals who support them to ensure safe and healthy fast. Guidelines from the study group and other guidelines like IDF and the Diabetes and Ramadan DAR International Alliance have come together to deliver a comprehensive set of guidelines to meet this need. Since the first Casablanca recommendation of 1995 and the other ADA of 2005, much progress has been made through the multiple consensus of experts and guidelines published since then. Despite this, the attitudes of the physicians were very different from each other, and many type 1 and especially type 2 diabetic patients followed the Ramadan fast with a very high average number of fasted days without much difference between subjects with high and low risk. All of these important works, the update of IDF DAR practical guideline, first published 2016, features new guidance based on greater and more recent body of evidence. This includes an updated set of criteria for risk stratification, information of the impact of fasting on physical and mental well-being, specific guidance on the management of type 1 and type 2 diabetes in special populations, such as pregnant women and the elderly, and information on changes to the risk of comorbidities, such as cardiovascular disease, stroke, and renal impairment. These guidelines, which were produced with experts from around the world, including many authors from MENA region and from Egypt, Professor Ines Shaltout, Professor Adil Sayed, Professor Yaqub Al-Midani, Professor Abdul Basit, Rashid Malek, Salma Maher are intended to provide real-world recommendation to health professionals and the people with diabetes who choose to fast. It's our hope these guidelines will contribute to supporting people with diabetes to safely and successfully participate in Ramadan and enjoy the personal and spiritual benefits it can bring. But great number of well-designed studies are still needed, as important questions still remain. Is fasting during Ramadan associated with significant risk or benefits to people with diabetes? What are the criteria that predispose people with diabetes to increased risk during fasting? What are the most appropriate medication for people with diabetes who fast during Ramadan? In all cases, your great meeting discussing all topics of diabetes and Ramadan, and particularly DAR guidelines 2022 are important for supporting diabetic patients. They allow physicians to have objective tools based on scientific data to quantify the risks associated with fasting. This will undoubtedly make it possible to better support patients who wish to fast safely. Yesterday, on March 19, Moroccan League for the Fight Against Diabetes with its partners had organized a virtual meeting on diabetes and Ramadan with Professor Andrew Boulton, President of IDF, Professor Hassanein, President of DAR, Professor Rashid Malek, President of DAR Francophone, and many eminent experts from Maghreb, Africa, France, and Belgium. It's really great thing to see that many activities from this topic were held in a region since January 2022. I think that the next step is to communicate and disseminate easily these recommendations and these guidelines in different countries in MENA region. Many thanks again for your invitation and warm congratulations for all the team of Arabic Association for the Study of Diabetes and Metabolism, particularly Professor Ines Shaltout. At the end of my message, I wish a lot of success to your meeting and hope to meet you soon in conference, face-to-face in Cairo or in other MENA countries. Thank you for your attention.
طبعا أنا أحب أشكر حضرتك وأتقدم باسم الجمعية بخالص العزاء لحضرتك our sincere condolences في فقد الوالدة الغالية، وأسفين طبعا إن احنا بنثقل على حضرتك أيام قليلة بعد وفاة الوالدة. هنقرأ لها الفاتحة كلنا إن شاء الله. Professor Mohamed Hassanein, Chair of DAR International Alliance. Dr. Mohamed.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم. Great pleasure to be with you all. يمكن اتكلم بالعربي على اساس اعتقد ما فيش ضيوف اجانب معانا اليوم. شرف عظيم نكون مع بعض كلنا، وللاسف انا يعني في الايفنت دي عن بعد، لكن ان شاء الله في المستقبل نكون مع بعض. طبعا التعاون ما بين دار والجمعيه العربيه في موضوع رمضان وفي موضوعات ثانيه كثير مهم جدا. والكونفرنس اللي احنا فيه النهارده مثال واضح لهذا التعاون والمجهود الرائع اللي بتعمله الجمعيه العربيه برئاسه الدكتوره ايناس شلتوت. اتمنى ان المؤتمر يكون يعني يكون فيه اللي انتم محتاجينه. الاجنده ما شاء الله فيها كل ما تتمناه النفس، او الطبيب في بخصوص رمضان. كميه ضخمه من الاساتذه والمحاضرين والمودريتورز كلهم توب ستارز في المجال. الحقيقه طبعا بالنسبه لمصر والكفاءات الضخمه اللي موجوده الاكاديميه في مصر، كلنا بننتظر الابحاث خاصه في موضوع رمضان والديتا اللي تخلينا نوصل في المستقبل لbetter evidence. What we are lacking is strong evidence. We have some evidence, but of course we need more and more robust evidence. And with such a rich country with a large number of professors and clinicians and researchers and universities, we sincerely hope that this momentum for increased educational activities will be also translated into better research and better services for people with diabetes who wish to watch Ramadan. أتمنى لكم مؤتمر ناجح، و thank you لكل المجموعة اللي ساهمت في نجاح هذا المؤتمر، ونشوفكم مع بعض إن شاء الله في المستقبل face to face.
شكرا دكتور محمد. بروفيسور دكتور محمد دكتور رأفت رشوان، Honorary President of the Arabic Association for the Study of Diabetes and Metabolism. بروفيسور رأفت.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كل سنة وانتم طيبين. أنا سعيد جدا لوجودي النهارده، وده للإيفنتس اللي بنعملها كل سنة الخاصة برمضان وإزاي بنستقبله as regard our patients and the physician. And I hope to be a successful event, and I would like to thank all the committee and Professor Ines Shaltut, Professor Amr Abdulwahab for their kind invitation for this session, and thank you very much.
خلوني أتكلم مع حضراتكم على أهمية موضوع الصيام في مصر، وخليني أتكلم بالعربي بتالي في وجود بعض الصحفيين. We have some media coverage today. رمضان في مصر له أهمية خاصة. إحنا عندنا في مصر according to updated International Diabetes Federation figures عندنا حوالي 11 مليون مصري مصاب بالسكر. لو حسبنا عدد الناس اللي بتصوم منهم هنلاقي طبعا في جزء كريستيان وفي جزء مسلمز، الماجوريتي طبعا are Muslims. لو حسبنا according to الريسيرش اللي احنا بنعمله، يعني في studies عملناها احنا في الجمعية قالت ان 98% of type 2 diabetic patients wish to fast، عندهم نية الصيام. 98% من type 2 diabetic patients. في الدار سيرفي اللي اتعمل قال ان في مصر 92% of type 2 diabetic patients wish to fast وعندهم نية الصيام. يبقى احنا عندنا في مصر من 92 ل 98% من type 2 diabetic patients they wish to fast. ده يجي لنا رقم أكتر من 9 مليون مصري مصاب بالسكر بيصوم في رمضان، وده اللي خلى هناك أهمية لخصوصية التعامل مع الدايبيتك بيشنت المصري. وعشان كده احنا يمكن طبعا بنستفيد بالدار جايد لاينز وبننقل الخصوصية بقى بتاعت المصريين. احنا عندنا environmental factors, social factors، في عوامل كتير بتغير من يمكن او مختلفة عن بقية البلاد. والنهاردة يمكن اليوم مخصص عشان نشوف ازاي نقدر to tailor الجايدلاينز والكونسنسس اللي معمولة في العالم كله على المصريين، ونطلع بأبديتد Egyptian consensus for fasting رمضان with diabetes. نتمنى لحضراتكم يوم موفق إن شاء الله. وهدي الكلمة لزميلي أستاذ دكتور عمرو عبد الوهاب Vice President of the Arabic Association for the Study of Diabetes and Metabolism.
كل سنة وحضراتكم طيبين. قرار انك تقول لحد انه يصوم او ما يصومش ده قرار خطير جدا. لا اما انك هتعرضه لو قلت له يصوم وهو غير قادر على الصيام، اما انك تعرضه لمضاعفات ملهاش لازمة، او انك تديله رخصة الصيام وهو لا يستحقها وتاخد الذنب انت. وبالتالي علينا ان احنا ندرس تماما ازاي نقدر نحدد العيان القادر على الصيام والعيان الغير قادر على الصيام. ما تنسوش ان الاصل ان هناك رخصة للمريض، مش الاصل ان احنا نصوم العيانين، الاصل ان احنا هناك رخصة للمريض. وهناك ايضا قاعدة فقهية بتقول درء الضرر مقدم على جلب المنفعة. يعني حضرتك لو مريضك عايز يصوم عشان يستفيد بثواب الصيام بس بيعرض نفسه لخطر ما، فهو في هذه الحالة يخالف القاعدة الفقهية. احنا هنلاحظ في الجايد لاينز اللي تقدم ليكم ان هناك حاجات مش محسوبة تخص الشعب المصري، منها درجة الحرارة اللي بيتعرض ليها اخواننا في الصعيد وانا منهم، منها ان احنا السوشيو ايكونوميك ستاندرد بتاعنا او احنا من اللو ميدل انكم كانتريز، وبالتالي فاحنا ما عندناش الفاسيلتي بتاع الاير كونديشننج في كل بلد، ولا عندنا الفاسيلتي ان العيانين بتوعنا ياخدوا البيست انسولين بريباريشن، ولا عندنا الفاسيلتي ان العيانين بتوعنا ياخدوا جي-LIB1 ريسبتور اجونست. فهتشوفوا ان احنا لينا خصوصيه ما، وبالتالي احنا محتاجين هنا في مصر ان يبقى لينا جايد لاينز تخصنا تراعي الحاجات الخاصه بمصر. ينبغي انك برضو لازم تاخد بالك وانت بتاخد قرار انه يصوم انه او ما يصومش، انك تشوف السبيشاليتي اللي انفولفد معاك في القرار. ما ينفعش ان عيان عنده انجينا وما ترجعش لواحد بتاع قلب وتقول له والله لو سمحت المريض ده بياخد انسولين بريباريشن شكله كذا معرض لهايبوغلايسيميا، هل العيان ده قادر انه يصوم ولا ما يصومش؟ اذا ما كانتش الاجابه موجوده في الجايد لاينز، فارجوك كن حريص وانت بتاخد القرار، لا تعرض مريضك لخطر ولا تاخد انت ذنب. وشكرا جزيلا. And now we'll move to our next speaker, Professor Mohamed Hassanein. You all know about him. He's going to speak about the importance of medico-religious harmony in Ramadan. Professor Mohamed, please take.
Assalamu alaikum. Allow me to present my lecture on the diabetes and Ramadan medico-religious harmony. And I just would make a small comment on the discussion of my dear friends and colleagues, Professor Ines and Professor Amr Abdul Wahab. Any international guidelines is meant to be modified locally to suit the local circumstances, whether this is the general diabetes guidelines or the cardiac guidelines, whatever. And certainly for a topic such as the interaction of social, religious, as well as medical aspects, certainly needs the local modification. So I'm going to address a point that we very rarely dig deep more into it, which is the medico-religious aspect. Now, this is not just unique to Egypt, but the Muslim world, the countries with Muslim majorities, have a much higher prevalence of diabetes than the countries with Muslim minority. So the issue of diabetes and Ramadan will become more and more a point that needs in-depth and thorough assessment over the next years and years and years until we get more stronger evidence. I don't think I need to tell you all about what is said in Quran, but sometimes we forget some of the important points. And I just put in bold the point from the surah when the ayah which says من كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر. So the decree of having a license not to fast for some people is already there. So the question of fasting or not fasting is always a very important point. And as mentioned by all of my good friends so far, there are some people who are exempt. So the questions really here when it comes to the bridge between religion and science is how do you decide on the risk categorization? We've just heard Professor Amr Abdul Wahab with his concerns about either underdiagnosing or overdiagnosing the risk of individuals who wish to fast Ramadan. Equally, when there is criteria or guidelines that are put, does it meet the medical opinion and the medical expertise of a specific place or a specific country, or they do not? Do the religious authorities agree with this or not? And do people with high risk accept not to fast or not? And finally, how to bridge the gap? So let me address some of these points. First, I will address the first 2 points. This is the latest guidelines, and I had the pleasure of attending some of the earlier sessions, and I can see that many of the presenters are using this guidelines. This is an official report from the IDF Central Office to myself as the chair of the Diabetes and Ramadan Alliance regarding the number of downloads. I'm delighted that this guideline includes a large number of colleagues from Egypt as well as from the MENA region in general. And as you can see here, it is over 45,000 downloads at the time of the report, which is a few months back. The highest 2 chapters for downloads is chapter 5 and chapter 10. And this is the chapter for the medico-religious risk categorization, as well as the chapter for type 2 diabetes management. So clearly, there is a serious demand and serious acceptance of the guidelines. Otherwise, I don't know why would people download it. The similar guidelines of 2016, which was published by IDF and DAR, had, and this is also an official report from the IDF to myself, it's not confidential, so I'm quite happy to share it with all of you, is there, at the time there was 20,000 downloads, and when the IDF was in Abu Dhabi, they reprinted 1,000 copies. At the end of the conference, they only had 15 that they kept secretly so that they can have a copy to keep in their offices. So that also is a reflection of the quality of the work done by many of the eminent academics from many countries, of course, including Egypt and MENA region. This is a very interesting survey which was published a few years back, done by one of my colleagues in 2016. Now, the survey looked into the physician's opinion on the point of the risk categories, such as, for example, severe hypoglycemia within the 3 months, DKA within the 3 months, type 1 diabetes being a high risk, recurrent hypos unawareness, sustained full glycemic control with an HbA1c above 10, or pregnant women. And yet again, the vast majority of doctors agree. But another important point is we will never get consensus from everyone, even for the blindly obvious points. And I've highlighted here a point about hypoglycemia and awareness. Nevertheless, we have 10.5% of those who answer the survey from many, many countries stating that, no, that person is moderate or low risk. Again, you can see the pregnant woman. And this is the opinion of physicians. I'm not talking about the opinion of the patients, the opinion of physicians. Some of them, 19% of them, are stating that they don't see it as high risk, as moderate to low risk. So clearly, there is consensus, but nevertheless, it will never be an absolute 100% agreement on any point. It's very difficult in life to get an agreement by everyone on any topic. So we just have to accept that the majority is a very good option. So we move then to the second point. Do religious authorities agree with the guidelines and the recommendations? Are we at dispute or a conflict with the religious authorities? And the reality is we are not. When you look into Quran, the first ayah of Quran was اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. So for those of you who do not understand Arabic or perhaps logging in virtually, the first ayah of Quran is talking about reading and about reading issues that are related to science. So there is never a dispute between Islam and science. Indeed, the decision of fasting is a decision that interacts between the religious practice, the medical recommendations, and finally, the person's own choice. When we look into our first guidelines, which was published in 2005, the International Islamic Council of Fiqh, along with the Organization of Islamic Conference, met and dissected the guidelines and came out with a decree that accepts our recommendations of very high and high risk are exempt, moderate and low should attempt to fast. When we had the further guidelines with the IDF in 2016, as well as in the latest one, 2021, we had the pleasure of the input of the highest authority of fatwa in Egypt, which is the Mufti of Egypt, along with the scientific advisor of the Mufti, Professor Dr. Magdi Ashur. So the front line is unity between medicine and science, as represented with this photo at the time of the launch of the 2016 guideline, where we had the late Professor Shawkat Sadikot, the president of the IDF, Dr. Abdul Al-Madani, the president of the Emirates Society, which hosted us at the time, Professor Dr. Magdi Ashur, and myself. So there was unity, and there's always been unity. So finally, since the doctors and the imams and the highest religious authorities are all saying the same thing, do our patients accept the medical decision? Specifically, those who are at high risk, of course, those with a very high risk, do they accept not to fast or not? Well, the reality is different. And we've seen this for many years back, not just these days. So the EPIDIAR study, which was published in 2004 and done in 2001. So 21 years ago, the data were showing to us that 42% of type 1 diabetes were attempting to fast. Although all the guidelines at the time are saying it is very high or high risk. GREED study, which looked into type 2 diabetes data and published in 2015, 94% of the Muslims fasted at least for 15 days. Of course, many of them have renal problems, cardiac problems, and many other problems, and perhaps many of them also are on intensive insulin. And we also see from the data the massive variation from country to country. Nothing better than this slide to show you the massive variation from country to country when it comes to type 1. And I have here highlighted the data from Egypt, which was collected. Over 1,000 persons were collected in this study published 2 years ago. 65% of the patients from Egypt with type 1 diabetes fasted, and 93% of the people with type 2 diabetes from Egypt fasted, with, as you can see, a big variation from country to country. So certainly, all the efforts of the experts in the field, the societies, are desperately needed, because I'm sure many of these patients should not fast because of their medical condition. we do need this unification between the healthcare professionals and the religious leaders. But not all patients go to the doctor before Ramadan. Not all patients will listen to the doctor even if they went. And some simply go to ask their family members or the imam. And we have seen this in London, where many of the pregnant ladies were not asking the doctor, they were asking the imam or the family members of what should I do here? Should I fast or should I not fast? And that obviously is not the right approach. Equally, it is not the mistake of these ladies, it is the mistake of the clinicians who have not been proactive enough to provide them with all the answers for their questions, whether it is they ask for it or not. So we definitely have a big gap between what we say as doctors and religious authorities and the reality. And we must try to bridge this gap. And this is really quite overdue. Again, it's the personal choice of the patient, but the personal choice of the patient is frequently the reflection of the opinion of the physician and of the community and of the religious authorities and on the media. And if everybody is pushing the patient in a different direction to what the doctor has said, then it is unlikely that the patient will listen to the expert opinion. They will just feel that perhaps I can push myself. So many we have seen over the years are not keen to take the license, the rukhsah. They are reluctant to take advantage of their concessions. And I think also because many of the advice given from religious authorities and from community leaders is talking about the person who fasts and the great thawab and the great ajr and the great benefits that the person fasting will have. And they don't mention enough that every person who has the intention of fasting but unable to fast because of their health condition will get exactly the same ajr and thawab. In fact, they will get the thawab and ajr for protecting their health and not putting their health into jeopardy. وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. And that's very clear message from our religion, but unfortunately, this message is not filtered enough. When we think of the Ramadan-focused education, we have this as recommendation that our target is healthcare professionals, but equal target is people with diabetes and general public. And I'm fully aware that over the last few weeks and the next few weeks, the arena in Egypt is full of meetings of medical healthcare professionals. And I'm certain also that there is much, much less meetings for the patient's comprehensive education or for interactions with the community and the religious authorities to upgrade their information and their knowledge. So we do a lot of healthcare professionals education, and we do far much less of the religious authorities, the community members, as well as definitely our final target and the most important target is the patients and their families. So we need to stress among us all, societies, academics, individuals, that we need to concentrate a lot more on this aspect. Again, I put this point, which is part of the education, the patient education program for the Dar Safa program that we have developed years back, which just a reminder for the patient, you can always compensate on another day. So, وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. If you have a difficult time, if you have a difficult day, then it's easy to take the decision, or should be easy to take the decision and to break the fast. This is what was in the recommendations from the clerics, from the International Islamic Council of Fiqh, which we adopted. And they have clearly mentioned that we as healthcare professionals, I would expand it rather than just doctors, should be briefed with an acceptable knowledge of fiqh provision on this subject. Equally, religious scholars should instruct patients to consult those doctors who understand the medical and religious aspects of fasting and are God-fearing. يخشى الله وعنده الخبرة والعلم. Not any doctor. Imams need to be acquainted themselves with these regulations and with the risk of diabetes when they are advising any Muslim person with diabetes with regard to fasting regulations. And the final point I mentioned, all efforts need to be made using media and other communication avenues to ensure that people with diabetes are aware of these regulations. We do need this merge between faith and science, and it reminds me with the beautiful programs of Rahmatullah alayhi Dr. Mustafa Mahmoud when he used to talk about al-ilm wal-iman, science and faith, in a nice, easy way from an expert as a physician as well as a person who was diving deep into the religious aspects of Islam. We do need these activities, and we have been very much active into this. In 2012, 10 years ago in London, we had this video program, which included an imam in London, a community pharmacist, a lead person from Diabetes UK, a physician, and an academic from the university specializing in diabetes education. And that was made available online. We have tried as much as possible to make the general public aware about the right messages. And I think it's very important to train the media people as well. Our first Dar International Conference was done at the British the British Muslim Heritage Center in reflection of the need of the merge between the medicine and the Islamic culture and regulations. This is a copy and paste from the Dar Conference of 2016, where we have on the second day trained the trainer session for the imams, for the media people, and for diabetes educators. We collaborated with the Awqaf authorities of Dubai and asked them to send all the imams for a session to be trained. And unfortunately, at the time, they gave them my phone number, so I was bombarded with phone calls from shuyukh, from imam of masajid, from the mosques, asking whether it's mandatory to attend or not. And of course, I said, yes, it's mandatory to attend. But we also had a session for the media people so that they can understand. A journalist or a media person sending the wrong message will be received by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So it's very important that we engage in that. We have been keen to reach, so here is a meeting with Diabetes Canada, and on the same day, Member of Parliament for that area in Toronto. And we had a huge session with the patients. You can see me here in the corner in Toronto talking to the patients in the mosque. Tomorrow, inshallah, you will have an excellent nadwa, Ramadan Bain al-Ilm wal-Deen, moderated by Professor Inas, and the speakers will be Professor Magdi Ashur and Professor Iman Kamel, the clinical nutritionist, and myself. The English version of this nadwa we just done last Sunday with Dr. Fathi Al-Audi as moderator, Dr. Maisa Hamada as a clinical nutritionist, and Dr. Professor Kubaisi as the great mufti in Dubai, with his ability to speak excellent English. It was an excellent session and will be available online soon. The Dar Safa program, patient application, as well as the website. We are in a difficult time of COVID, and many of our patients were not coming to group sessions. So we need to use technology. And if you were to use the technology and download the application, you will get the section of Ta'allam min al-Khubara. The application is in 4 languages, including Arabic. And you will see here many questions being answered in English or in Arabic, including the second questions answered by the Imam and the Mufti of Dubai and the Chancellor of the Mufti or the Advisor of the Mufti from Egypt. So, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you again with this slide as my conclusion. We as healthcare professionals need to know more about the fiqh of Ramadan fasting. Religious scholars and imams need to be informed and advised about the ins and outs of the recommendations and the guidelines and the risks. And we also need to spend more time with media people so that they can themselves, not just us talking and having a reporter taking questions or a TV program, they also need to be on the same tune with us so that they can understand and filter the right messages. And with this, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will يتقبل مننا صالح الأعمال and Ramadan Kareem for all of you. Thank you all.
I'd like to thank Professor Hassanein, my dear friend, for his spiritual, religious, scientific talk. And anyone has a question for Professor Hassanein? Any comment? Would like to comment, Dr. Inaz?
دكتور محمد، عايزين نفعل موضوع الإمام education على رمضان في مصر إن شاء الله. وطبعا عايزين احنا معانا دكاترة كتير virtual النهاردة، يعني عندنا الاتندنس وصل virtual and physical 2000 doctors، فاحنا عايزين الدكاترة يبقوا معانا في مجهود ازاي نعمل education للإمام كل واحد في المكان بتاعه. فأرجو إن احنا نبتدي نعمل اللينك ده وتحت رعاية البروفيسور جمال وال IGF مينا ريجن ان يكون في education للإمام، لأن احنا يعني ده موضوع مهم قوي، والبيشنت دايما بيروح يسأل الإمام. طبعا احنا عندنا religious authorities سواء كان الأزهر نفسه أو دار الإفتاء، هناك فتاوى سامحة جدا ومبنية على أساس علمي، ولكن ما أقدرش أقول إن كل إمام مسجد صغير هيبقى عنده نفس المستوى من المعلومات.
أنا متأكد إن كلامك حضرتك مظبوط دكتورة إيناس. لابد من التعاون مع الهيئات العليا في هيئة الأوقاف، لأنها الجهة المنوط لها تدريب أئمة المساجد. وما شاء الله الاعضاء الكفاءات العاليه اللي موجوده في الجمعيه وفي الجمعيات الاخرى في كافه المحافظات يقدروا ان هم ينوبوا عننا في المحافظات المختلفه، لان لابد ان احنا نوصل لمستوى اعلى من ثقافه الامام وخطيب المسجد في هذه النقاط المهمه، وخاصه لما تكون في فتوى طالعه من الجمعيه او من الدوله او من هيئه الاوقاف نفسها في خصوص الموضوع. فبالتاكيد تثقيف الائمه نقطه مهمه جدا، وتثقيف المرضى. انا اتذكر دكتوره ايناس تفتكر الزملاء من الجمعيه لما خدوا على عاتقهم نشر الاديوكيشنال بروجرام، واتذكر الدكتوره عبير كانت بتعمل محاضرات في المسجد، واكيد الزملاء الثانيين يعملوا، بس انا اتذكر الصوره بتاعت الدكتوره عبير كانت شافتها معايا، لكن متاكد ان زملاء كتير عملوا نفس الكلام سواء في الجمعيات او في الجامعات او في المساجد نفسها. patient education مش لازم يكون في مكان مكلف او مكان غالي.
طبعا انا برضو بقول للساده الحضور سواء الفيزيكال او الفيرتشوال ان احنا عندنا بكره جلسه مهمه جدا. اللينك ريجستريشن بكره مختلف عن النهارده، وبكره اللينك هيبقى فيه محاضرات قيمه جدا هتبتدي الساعه 2 الظهر، وهتبقى فولود بلقاء مع فضيله دكتور الشيخ مجدي عاشور المستشار العلمي لفضيلة مفتي الديار المصرية، وهنبقى فاتحين على أسئلة حضراتكم بكرة كله فيرتشوال من الساعة 2 لغاية الساعة 5:30 تقريبا، كله فيرتشوال. هنتلقى الأسئلة وهنسمع فضيلة الدكتور مجدي بعد مجموعة من المحاضرات العلمية الأونلاين. فحضراتكم اللي ملحقش يسجل لبكرة يا ريت يسجل النهارده. بروفيسور جمال، ممكن نعمل ايه في المينا ريجن تبقى حاجه تحت رعايه المينا ريجن للبيشنتس الايجيبشن والكمان الارابيك او المسلم؟ احنا عندنا اليوتيوب شانل النهارده كمان احنا بنسجل محاضرات كتيره بيشنت education سيشنز صغيره هتتحط على اليوتيوب بتاع الجمعيه، الفيسبوك جروبس بتاعت الجمعيه والفيسبوك بيج، يعني هنحط على سوشيال ميديا كميه كبيره من المعلومات اللي هي يمكن اكتر فيديوز بتتشاف هي الفيديوز بتاعت دايابيتس رمضان على فكرة، يعني دي يمكن اكتر حاجة عليها اقبال. فايه رأي حضرتك ممكن نعمل ايه للمينا ريجن تبقى تحت رعاية المينا ريجن مع الأنشطة في مصر عندنا؟
شكرا الأستاذة إيناس وشكرا للأستاذ محمد حسنين على الكلام القيم وعلى المجهود الكبير اللي تقوم به جميعا. أعتقد أنه في المينا ريجن أنه عندنا نفس التوجه، نفس الإحساس. نتمنى ونريد أن يصوم مرضانا وعلى أي حتى الذين لا يصوموا أن يأخذوا حذرهم، لأن المشكل ليس فقط بالنسبة للصائم، كذلك بالنسبة للسكري غير الصائم. وأعتقد أنه ما قامت به الدار يشكل أرضية كبيرة جدا دوليا ومحليا لمنطقتنا، وخاصة وأن كل ما جاء في الجايد لاينز مهم جدا وممكن أن نقوم به كجمعيات كل في بلده، ولكن كذلك يمكن أن نتعاون على إخراج مذكرات نرسلها باسم المنطقة إلى وزراء والأوقاف في الدول العربية والإسلامية لنحثها على الأخذ بالموضوع بأكبر حيطة وبأكبر عناية. وأنا أعتقد كذلك أن صلاة الجمعة تكون حبذا لو استطعنا أن نرسل رسالة باسم المنطقة لوزارات الأوقاف في الدول العربية والإسلامية موحدة تقرأ وتعطى يوم الجمعة، لأن يوم الجمعة يوم عظيم ويوم تجتأ فيه الصلاة وفيه خطبة الإمام لكل المسلمين في أنحاء العالم تعطيها قيمة كبيرة. وأعتقد أن ما جاء في كلام وتقديم محاضرة الأستاذ حسنين حول التعاون الطبي والديني في إطار الإيمان وحب الإسلام وحب رمضان لدى كافة المسلمين وتقديس رمضان. أعتقد أننا نقدس رمضان كثير جدا، ولهذا أعتقد أن هناك إمكانات كبيرة جدا للتعاون بين بلداننا بين جمعياتنا. اللي مهم هو أن أولا كل جمعية تعطي الموضوع قيمة كبيرة. وأعتقد أن هذه السنة الماضية وهذه السنة عرفت نشاطا جدا جدا مهما لم يسبق له من قبل أن رأيناه بفضل الجايد لاين ديال الدار، بفضل العمل الكبير والدؤوب للأستاذ محمد حسنين. وإن شاء الله نمشي في هذا الطريق ونشوف إن شاء الله نتائج جميلة ونشوف دراسات أخرى فيها، لأن رمضان كل سنة يأتي بجديد، كل سنة يتغير، مرضى جدد يدخلون إلى قائمة المرضى ومعطيات جديدة، علاجات جديدة، كل هذا يعطي نكهة خاصة ويعطي ميزة خاصة للسكري خلال ورمضان كل سنة. وشكرا للأستاذة إيناس.
احنا بنشكر حضرتك جدا، وطبعا احنا برضو لازم نرجع الفضل لأهله ان حضرتك في خلال العامين الماضيين كرئيس للاتحاد الفيدرالي الدولي منطقة الشرق الأوسط، الحقيقة ان هي شهدت نشاط كبير جدا في كافة المستويات يمكن لم تجدوا قبل كده. يعني ما كانش بنحس بقيمة التعاون الدولي في منطقة الشرق المتوسط وشمال أفريقيا، ولكن يعني لازم نقول لحضرتك احنا متشكرين، وان شاء الله السنة القادمة نجد تتويج لهذا النشاط، ونرجو ان احنا في الاعوام القادمة يستمر النشاط مع منطقة الشرق الأوسط، لأن الحقيقة ده بيفيد كل الدول والعربية دول الشرق الأوسط التعاون والأنشطة في مجالات كتيرة جدا. فمتشكرين لحضرتك بروفيسور جمال بالقدير رئيس منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا في الاتحاد الفيدرالي الدولي، وبنشكر حضرتك دكتور محمد حسنين رئيس الدار ألاينس ورئيس دار ايجيبت كمان، دي جديدة بنبارك لك بيها، وندعو حضراتكم للتواجد معانا في بقية البرنامج إن شاء الله، ونشوفكم عن قريب. نشكركم جدا وبنقدم لكم تحياتنا، وإلى أن نلقاكم قريبا إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله.